You're listening to the Heart Lessons Podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so glad that you're joining me here today. Today is part 3 of the Mother's Day series here on the podcast, and it features my friend Caitlin Mathieu from Due to Joy. And the conversation that Caitlin and I have today is regarding what it is like to be an invisible mother. And if you're not familiar with that term, it simply means a mother with no living children, a mother with empty arms. And as you can imagine, especially around the Mother's Day holiday, it's really hard if you're a mother and your child is not here to celebrate with you. And so Caitlin and I are just going to talk today about what it means to be an invisible mother and how she navigates the whole thing with so much grace and so much wisdom and so much glory to the Lord. And I just really admire her story and her heart for other women who have lost and who are experiencing the same depth of pain that she has walked through, and the Lord brought her to the other side. If you've been around for any amount of time, you know that's one of my passions as well, is encouraging women in general, but especially women who have walked the road of infant loss. And so when I just see other women doing the same thing and just pulling others alongside of them and saying, hey, I've been there, let's do this together, let's encourage one another, I just have so much respect and admiration for women who do that. And so I just can't wait for you to be encouraged by Caitlin's story. And if you are listening today and you are an invisible mother, or if you've experienced pregnancy or infant loss or a loss of a child in any capacity, our hearts are with you so much. And we are dedicating this episode to you so you will feel so much less alone, and so you will feel heard and loved. And just know that we are thinking of you today. Along those same lines, on my blog this month, for the month of May, for the month of Mother's Day, I have a series running called Dear Lost Mama, It's Okay If. And when I walked through my losses a few years ago, I just was so confused about the whole grief thing. Grief is so confusing, and especially around Mother's Day, it can be just incredibly confusing and painful to walk that day without your baby with you. And so I wanted the blog to be a safe place if that is something that you're experiencing, if your heart is hurting this month. So you can head to sarahrieke.com/blog for those articles. And I hope, just as I know Caitlin's story will, I hope the posts and the articles that you find there will be encouraging to your heart and just help you feel less alone. All right, friends. Well, I am just so excited for you to hear Caitlin's story and just her heart for loss and her heart for the Lord and the story that he brought her through. And so without further ado, here is Caitlin Mathieu. Well, Caitlin, welcome to this episode of the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm so glad to have you joining me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And I'm super excited to include your story in this Mother's Day series. And today we are going to be talking about your perspective on what it is to be an invisible mother. And that just means to be a mother without a living child. And so just especially as Mother's Day is around the corner, I just think it's important to include that perspective, because there are a lot of women who really are biologically mothers and they don't look like they are because their children aren't here. And so I just want to have your perspective on that. But to start us off, before we, talk about all of that, can you just tell us, Caitlin, a little bit about you and where you live and what you do, and just a snapshot of who you are?
Yeah, of course. My name is Caitlin Mathieu. I teach kindergarten. I live in Houston, Texas, and married to my husband, Colton, and we have a German Shepherd named Ava, and she's incredibly cuddly and super annoying, but adorable. And we lost a baby last October, and her name is Avery, and she's very special to us both. But yeah, I'm excited to share my story today.
Yeah, well, why don't you go ahead and just jump in and just talk to us about your loss and your experience. And I know I read some of it on your blog, and it's a pretty intense story and pretty emotional. So just share that with us.
Okay. It was October of 2016, just a fall day. My husband and I had gone to our favorite local coffee shop, and we just frequent the coffee shop, hang out on the weekends. And I started experiencing this really hard, intense cramping. And I wasn't sure what it was. At that time, I didn't realize that I was pregnant. But in that same moment, like hours later, went to the restroom and sort of found out that I was pregnant and also was no longer pregnant. I know that I didn't have a whole lot of background knowledge on miscarriage, so I had a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. So, of course, I dove to the internet and my mom and my doctor, and basically the pain that I was experiencing in that coffee shop, I found out later that was just excruciating labor pains. I bled for weeks and didn't really have time to grieve that. I immediately returned back to work, and teaching kindergarten, being surrounded by little ones that accidentally call you mommy all day was just, it was incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I was so fortunate to be working with such an amazing team of teachers that loved me and supported me and were just an incredible support system. I actually had a teaching partner that had lost twins the year before.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, my heart broke with her. And so we were able to bond on such a deep mama level that, I mean, it just gives me chills to see how God had his hand in every relationship that was formed through this. And I've just seen his faithfulness throughout the past sort of year and a half. Don't get me wrong, I've had like the most dark seasons of my life, but that's just what they were, is that they're seasons and that I wasn't stuck in them. And I will just, every breath that I have, I will say how faithful God has been in those dark seasons, that he never left me, and that although depression and anxiety almost took my life, I've seen how Jesus has just been there, and how my support system, my family, and my husband have just really supported me and loved me well, and things that would have completely crumbled me have made me stronger just by God's grace and his faithfulness. And so sort of throughout that journey of grieving that I'm still walking through, I've seen Jesus restore my joy that I thought would never, ever happen, because you get in such a dark place. And so I'm sort of walking through that with my family and like praying with them and asking God, like, what do you want to do with this pain?
Yeah.
I don't want it to be wasted.
Yeah.
And just seeing that, like, Jesus loves to give a purpose to our pain, and he doesn't want it to be wasted. And so I remember just sitting down with my big brother, and he's sort of discipled me and mentored me my whole life. And so he told me to ask the Lord what he wanted me to hear in this dark place I was in. And it was such a dark place. Like I could not see light, and I had almost lost hope. But I've seen God take my fears and just replace them with a promise that he's never left me, and that I have nothing to fear. And my whole life is stamped with battling fear ever since I was a child. I mean, I had to go to counseling for the fear of death. And so Jesus has used that, something that, oh my goodness, the devil could have used to destroy me, and to just turn it around for his glory, and see that, like, knowing, like, ever since I was a tiny little girl, I wanted to be a mommy. Like, I had this baby doll that I took everywhere, and my mom and dad did foster care, so I just had this little nurturing mama heart since I was itty bitty.
Oh, that's sweet.
And then when I was 11 years old, my parents adopted my now sister, Lizzie, and I just got to see her grow and practically help raise her and dress her up and just adore her. And so now seeing how God has used that like maternal desire to, in my career, to teach kindergarten, I didn't really expect my story to turn out how it has. Now I can look back and see like Jesus can use this pain for his glory. And I don't know that I could have said that a year and a half ago because I just didn't see it. I remember pleading and asking God, like, what do you want in this season for me? But I'm able to see his faithfulness sort of through that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing testimonies of that because like it feels so much like God forgot. But the truth is, he hasn't, and he's carrying you. And it doesn't make the pain like go away. It doesn't necessarily lessen it, but somehow it's just like on your, you might have you might be deeply grieved, but there's like a baseline of contentment or just a baseline of knowing that God is carrying you. And it does make all the difference. What was it like for you experiencing the loss of a baby at the same time that you discovered that you were pregnant? Like that had to be, that had to be just one of the hardest parts. Like how did you come to wrap your mind around what was happening? And then talk me through like just your acceptance journey of just figuring all of it out together.
Right. I think my initial thought was just pure confusion.
Yeah.
I think because I didn't know anything about miscarriage, what it looked like, what it felt like. I honestly just WebMD'd it and I was like, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
And so that's not always the best. I wouldn't recommend to a friend just jump into the internet.
Right.
I did call my doctor. She said that sounds exactly like a miscarriage. I mean, I could have sent her a picture of it. I honestly was so confused and didn't want to believe it. So I think at the beginning it was just sort of like, no, this can't be. This isn't what I think it is. And then my sweet husband, he had no idea either. So he's trying to give me benefit of the doubt. Like, I'm sure it's not that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but it could be. And then to have it sort of confirmed in that way of, oh yeah, and I'm 2 weeks later still bleeding from this. And so I think sort of looking back, I should have taken time off work. I should have mourned and sort of had a healthy rhythm of getting back into life. I think I probably would have healed differently, not quicker or better, but I mean, I have no way of knowing, but I definitely wasn't in a healthy place. I think my depression sort of took a turn for the worst when I isolate myself. And so that the devil wants me to be alone and to feel misunderstood and to feel like God has left me or my body has failed me. And those are all lies. And I know that, of course, but at the time when I'm alone and it's 2 a.m. and I'm not sleeping, my voice is the only voice I hear, and and they're all lies. So my first step to kind of accepting what had happened was combating lies. So the devil says that you're not enough and that you see all your, I'm from a really young church. Like we have so many pregnant women and babies everywhere, and half of them are my very close friends.
Yeah.
So you look at your best friends and you're overjoyed. So that sort of took a turn for me of like, instead of feeling that overwhelming joy, I felt that kind of fade away and turn into this like painful heartburn that just ached in my heart. When I would see babies or see mamas, or when a coworker would ask if I was pregnant because, well, you're dizzy. And that was because I had lost all that blood.
Oh, yeah.
So just small talk, and we're friends. And so she was just like, oh, are you pregnant? I mean, you're young. I know you're naive. And, when you get dizzy, that's a symptom. And I was just like, no, I'm not. That's no. So little things like that would shatter me. And so I had to I'm still learning, Sarah. Let's be
Yeah.
real.
Oh, we all are for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had to really hear God's voice in him saying, like, you need to extend grace to people who say things and don't know your story.
Mm.
And people who say things and do know your story. Like, you've got to extend that same grace. And so that season looked like a ton of learning on my part, learning to trust God with my fears. I think, like I said, my whole childhood was just stamped with battling fear. And so I dealt with so many fears from that first moment of the miscarriage to even now. I can see God's faithfulness in cutting down those lies from the devil and just honestly working through the fear of it happening again or getting pregnant again or me not being able to carry a baby full term, or am I going to be a good mom, or are people going to forget my baby? And so these were all fears that I've had to just like release my white knuckles and just allow God to take this from me because it's too heavy to carry and it's not mine to carry.
Yeah.
So I've seen God heal places of my heart where I just thought, surely there's no coming back from this. Like I'll never be the same bubbly Caitlin I was. But then it also took me a while to realize I sort of have to discard the idea of me returning to exactly who I was before we lost Avery,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like life looks different, my rhythms look different. I'm trying to be healthier and trust Jesus with the things that I hold so tightly. But yeah, I think that he wants to take our fears and replace them with faith. And I know that he's taken my sorrow and like replaced it with joy. And I thought that it would forever be that dark. And so now I'm sort of, I mean, obviously still walking through the grief of this, but seeing like there is light on the other side and it's not always going to be this suffocating. So I want to use my blog to give hope to other moms that are walking through that. Maybe they're in the darkness and they see like they can't see the future, what God wants for them in this, or how God could possibly use something so horrific for his good or for our good even. It blows my mind. I don't even know what words to say.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, he does want to give purpose to our pain, and he's glorified when we like even in our deepest sorrow, when we make attempts to like find him in all of it and bring him glory. I think that's how the purpose can be found.
Right.
Tell me about your blog. I know it is called Due to Joy. Tell me where that name came from and just, your goals. Like you just touched a little bit on, you want to give hope to mothers in your situation, but just tell us a little bit about your blog.
Okay. Yes, it's called Due to Joy. I had this idea for the blog, kind of started out as a journal, and then I would type my journal. And so it was super personal. I wasn't planning on sharing it with anyone, not even my husband. It was just honestly word vomit. And then I would keep sort of categorized verses that I'd play on loop in my heart, and I'd try to memorize them, and I would write them on my hands and my arms, and just memorizing scripture has become like, your praise through the hurt. And so when I didn't have the words, I would just jump into the Bible and say, like, God, just teach me something. Show me what you want me to hear in this. I don't know what to even do or to say, but I'm just going to ask the Lord to give me the words. And so the blog sort of happened by surprise. I had sort of calculated when I thought I had conceived and when the due date would be, because your mind wanders. And so
yeah, for sure.
I just sort of done the math, and I decided to launch the blog on what would have been Avery's due date. And so that's where the title Due to Joy came from. As I posted my first post, I was incredibly nervous because I couldn't really hide behind the facade of my being okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it was all out there. And so I had to release those fears to the Lord of saying, like, God, whatever you want to do with this, I'm going to trust you to protect my heart. And although I'm going to have to be vulnerable and it feels like I'm just standing naked in front of strangers, pray that you'd use that. And so I've seen the Lord use words that I don't even remember writing to reach women who have also dealt with this, miscarriage, baby loss, stillbirth. I mean, anything, any type of child loss. Somehow this community were able to relate with each other and build these sweet bonds. So that's really sweet to see, but it also breaks my heart that each view that I see on this website is another mama that's grieving and hurting. And so, I mean, it just breaks my heart to think about, like,
Yeah.
it's a sweet thing to relate to someone, but it's not a club that I want anymore.
No, yeah. It's like not a
You
club
know?
that any of us would have picked, but we're thankful that we're
Right.
all in it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I get that. So, what do you want a mother who comes to your blog? Like, what do you feel like your main encouragement to her would be?
Oh man, just that you're not alone.
Mm.
That
And that's huge.
whatever. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the first lie that the devil wants to tell
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah, for
That you're
sure.
isolated, you're alone, no one understands you. You're going to be stuck in this season forever, right? Like such a lie.
Yeah.
So, my hope is that any woman or any human that reads that would see that they're not alone, and whatever their season looks like, whether they've lost a child or they're trying to conceive or they're just looking for some type of hope, that they would feel understood or like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, I try to be
Yeah.
really honest in my blog. And so, yeah, I want them to know that they have a freedom to share, that they don't need to hide their pain or their hurt. Because I really honestly feel like there's so much power in your testimony.
Yeah.
And so when people feel that freedom to share, I feel like chains are broken whenever you're facing your fears. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree. I agree completely. And I especially agree about just being honest and letting people know that you're not alone in what you're thinking, because I think, like, especially, those of us in Christ, like, sometimes we don't know what it looks like to grieve the right way. I know I struggle
Right.
with that a lot. It's like, am I allowed to feel like this? The peace that passes all understanding that they talk about, like, why do I feel so sad if I'm supposed to have this peace? And so just to read someone who says, I love the Lord, and yet I am in a really dark place, like that brings so much comfort, and just bringing that into the light is the first step in getting yourself out of the darkness. So yeah, I appreciate that so very much.
I completely agree. I think grief can often be like something that people feel they need to hide, and that they are weak if they share it, or that they're going to burden someone if they share kind of what they're walking through. But there's so much freedom in sharing what's on your heart, and it's terrifying, but it's beautiful. And so I feel like even Christians feel this need to sort of pretend that we're fine. And I mean, why do we do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, just thinking in my own life, it feels like maybe you wouldn't be like glorifying the Lord as much if you cried. I mean, I don't know,
Right.
because the Bible talks about peace and joy and all those things, and grief and sorrow are the opposite of that. And so, but then also the Bible does talk about grief and sorrow, a lot. And even Jesus himself was a man of sorrows. Like, that's one of his
Right.
names.
Blessed
So,
are those who mourn.
exactly. So I just think bringing all that to light is just so healthy,
Yeah.
because we're feeling it. And so just like to admit it and to come to each other and acknowledge it is just huge for healing. All right, Caitlin, what do you think has been the hardest thing? I mean, besides, just your loss and processing everything. But what's been the hardest thing about being an invisible mother and just living knowing that you are a mother, but having no like visual?
Right. I think that's so hard to put into words
Yeah.
because it's not one specific physical thing. It's more of like an absence of a thing. Or yeah, so man, that's really hard to put into words. I've never really thought about what the most difficult thing is, as far as like feeling unseen, because I feel like that points it back to me, and it's more of like my wanting to protect the memory of our
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I really don't know how to put that into words.
No, that's good. I actually read a blog post today. I'll put a link in the show notes, but it was about a mother who had a stillbirth at 38 weeks, and she said motherhood is less about tending, or I'm sorry, for her, motherhood isn't about tending to like an actual baby. It's about tending to his memory. And
Wow.
so, like, when you're, like you said, when you don't have your child here, you still feel the need to like nurture something.
Right.
And so I think what you said is completely accurate. Like you just like want to make sure that memory is there and that baby is like still matter to you, and you want that baby to matter in the world
Right.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you know how people grieve differently and it follows no rules. Grief has no timeline.
Yeah.
So I think that people that were close to me would see that I was still so deeply affected by the miscarriage that, I mean, months later, that it sort of was like, what, why are you sad? Why are you depressed? And so those questionings of like, why are you still so affected by this, made me feel sort of misunderstood, or that they didn't see how great of a loss it was for me. Like it wasn't just an idea of a kid that came and went. It was an actual child that I carried and that I lost, and that I mean, my physical body felt changes from that. And so I think seeing how people maybe are unaware, that I don't need to take that personally, but it still affected me greatly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also, like, again, I'm just speaking from my own experience, but like a loss was also a crisis of faith almost. You know, it was like it shattered my world in more than one way, including like my relationship with the Lord. Like I had to like rebuild. So I
Yeah.
think that's part of also that grief journey is like, not only did you lose a baby, but you also kind of lost the innocence of your faith maybe, and you have to build that back up.
Right.
And that's really hard too.
Definitely tested my faith, and it became more of like like, Caitlin, you can say these words and you can say them with your mouth, but are you going to believe them with your heart when it
Yes.
comes down to it?
Yeah.
So that's huge. That's something that will either break you or really grow you. And so, I think it's a fight to fight back for that joy. And even when it seems completely impossible, there's a verse, I think it's Job 8:21. He will once again fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. And that's in the book of Job. Like, if you've ever read Job, you wouldn't expect that verse to be found in that book. And so I think I just held on to that with like the hope that God could possibly restore my joy. And
Yeah.
I could talk for like 6 hours on God's faithfulness and how he's restored my
That's
joy
awesome.
through this. So, because you almost feel guilty for feeling happiness or joy after such a deep loss. So,
Yeah. Like almost like you'd be betraying your baby's
right.
memory. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm so thankful that the Lord has shown you that. Just praise to his name, because that is the kind of thing that, I don't know, that's the testimony that people need to hear. And
Right.
yeah, I love that. Well, you have a post on your blog, 10 Things Not to Say to a Mother Who Has Miscarried. And I just imagine that people say things to you a lot because since you don't have a child, physically there with you, I'm sure they make a lot of assumptions about like, oh, she's not ready, or, they're not quite at that stage yet, or maybe she doesn't want kids. And so how have you found grace to just handle some of those comments that come your way? Yeah. Like what's a graceful way to kind of handle those?
That is a great question. I'm not sure that I have an answer for each comment that
Yeah.
someone might say.
Yeah. But just like in general, like you're like,
right.
Here's how I kind of approach this topic.
So I'm 25, and so I'll go to church and someone will say, hey, when y'all having kids? And it's just a small talk. Like people think this is an acceptable small talk topic.
Right.
So, that happens often. And so, if it's someone that I'm like really close with and they're genuinely wanting to know my baby timeline, then I would say something along the lines of, I would feel so incredibly grateful to have a healthy baby. I do know that God is the author of life. So even if I make all these plans, it might work out that way and it might not. I'm trying to be patient in the season that I'm in, but when are you having kids?
Yeah, right.
And it's like a 50-year-old, like grandma, cute little lady from church. And so I don't know how to answer each of these comments, but I think a lot of the time at the beginning of sort of walking through that grief, I would kind of laugh it off and, yeah, no, I'm fine. But I don't think it's wrong to say, I recently went through child loss and I had a miscarriage, and so we're waiting to have kids. But thank you for asking. Or, my intent should not be to make someone feel bad for asking. Mm-hmm. So I would kind of like gauge my audience. I'm not going to tell the cashier at Kroger that,
right.
I don't really want to. I want to trust who I share my heart with. Mm-hmm. And so to say that you have to say that or to not say that, it's your story to share. So
yeah, I think that's really wise because like you said, I think you need to evaluate who it is and what the situation is. And I know for me, like I have 3 living kids, and they're spaced approximately 3 years apart between what appears to be first and second and third. But the truth is I had a baby in between there. And so when people say like, oh, well, what a great spacing, or, whatever, they'll make a comment and it kind of stings. Like nothing's ever going to take away that sting. But I feel like, I don't know, do I want to go into it with just a mom at the park? Like probably not, And, but if it was a friend, some friends in the neighborhood that I'm going to see them often, and it came up and I felt safe and comfortable sharing, but just not everybody. And I don't know, the verse comes to mind, like casting your pearls before swine, which is like the lady at Kroger is not swine. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, it is your heart and it is your baby and it is some really precious and delicate memories. And so it's okay to tell people if you want to tell people. It's okay not to. It's okay to, like you said, exercise wisdom with the situation and the person. And so, I just appreciate your wisdom on that topic.
Absolutely. And I feel your sting when you say like to share or not to share. Like it's not dishonoring your baby to not share, but your heart might feel that like, oh, I'm not even mentioning my baby that isn't so deeply in my heart,
Yeah.
But there's no shame in that. It's, your story, and God knows your baby's names, and he's caring for those babies in heaven. That's the sweetest.
Yeah.
So but on another comment, thinking about when someone will say something that's ill-timed, or if they say like, don't wait too long to have kids, your body clock won't work forever. I'm a little more feisty than I used to be, and so I might say, no, I rebuke that. Like God is the author of life, and if he chooses to, bless us with a child when I'm however years old, then praise God. And if he
Yeah.
doesn't, praise God,
Mm.
So, I mean, I don't know what advice I would give someone, but if you feel that someone is telling you that God can't work a miracle, then, rebuke it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was kind of thinking about this next question, and I want to ask, like, how can a friend, like, what have your friends done that has
Mm-hmm.
been, like, your friends, you said there are so many of your friends that are pregnant and they have
Mm-hmm.
children. What have they done that has been most helpful to you? And just like with the caveat, I suppose, for any listeners saying, I understand that everyone has a very unique relationship, unique dynamics within friendships and all that. So this probably isn't going to go across the board, but just for you, Caitlin, like what have people done that has meant a lot to you? Or what have they done that has been like, yeah, I kind of didn't love that.
Right. I think that along the lines of like my support system, knowing that I had a group of girls at church and my brother and sister that would just cover me with prayer, and I would feel like I was being prayed for. Like it's so prayer is such a powerful thing that God uses to communicate with us, and so I think just that I would say that's the number one thing was that they would pray for me and they would pray with me and behind my back and in front of me. And it was just huge in feeling understood and heard and cared for, and that my grieving heart was sort of nurtured in that way. I had, I have a sweet, sweet friend named Kayla, and she was actually helped throw a baby shower for her 2 weeks after I miscarried. And so she knew everything that was happening, and she was so like gentle with my heart and was like, you don't need to do anything that you are uncomfortable with. And I mean, it's not like she's so far from a fair weather friend. Like she's there in the hard middle of the night. I can call her and she will just pray over me. And so she just has some sweet, encouraging spirit about her that makes you feel so loved. And I've seen, how I was saying how like you would look at other people's babies and kind of have that sting in your heart
Yeah.
of just a pain of absence of what you could have had or whatever.
Yeah.
It was actually her little baby that once her baby was born, I felt like the Lord had sort of restored my joy when I looked at that baby. And so just seeing how God has used her, I'm going to cry, used her and her sweet baby Eden, it's just, I just feel so blessed to even know her. So, of course, like close friendships, always being there for you whenever you're texting or calling or anytime you need anything. That's just the comfort of having someone when you need them, and the freedom to say like, hey, I don't really want to talk. I just kind of want a warm body in the room. And that's, or, hey, I need to get out. Like, meet me at Target and we're going to walk, and we're not even going to talk. We're just going to walk.
Yeah.
Just giving you the freedom to be or say or hug, that's been super helpful in sort of walking through friendships with that. I think my most helpful thing has been my family just covering me in prayer. And so that's been huge, huge, huge in my healing.
Yeah. And going on behind the scenes, like there probably were times that you didn't even know that they were, I mean, sometimes you said they were praying in front of you, but there were times when they may have woken up in the middle of the night to like bring you before the Father. And yeah, that's just incredible.
It is definitely life-changing.
Well, in that article, that blog article that I'll link to in the show notes, it was just about invisible motherhood. There was this quote that I just wanted to see what your thoughts are, or see if you'd experienced something similar. But she wrote, "Motherhood means defending my motherhood when people try to strip it from me for having empty arms." Have you felt like people don't consider you a mother because of your situation, that you lost a baby, you miscarried a baby, and it looked a lot different than, maybe a mother who lost, I don't know, a child to cancer or something like that. Have you felt people like not validate your motherhood?
Yeah, I think that just the fact alone that it's not a tangible child that other people can see on the outside. I mean, I don't have a baby on my hip, and
Right.
I don't have, a car seat in my car. So yeah, definitely. I think that there could be a misconception of if you don't see their child, then they're not a mom. But that's so not the case. Like the size of my heart that is ready to carry a baby and love a baby is the same heart that already loves a baby that is a citizen of heaven. Like
Yeah.
it's something that I don't even understand. So I've got to extend that grace to people who also don't understand it,
Yeah. There's a quote that I wrote down. It's from, I don't know if you are familiar with the Still Standing online magazine, but
Oh, yeah.
Francesca Cox is one of the editors. She's one of the main people there. And she just has this quote: "A mother is not defined by the number of children you can see, but by the love she holds in her heart." What you went through was hard. And yeah, and you are a mother because you carry this baby and you have this baby and this memory that you want to preserve. And when you get to heaven, your baby will
Yeah.
be there. Like, she
Yeah.
exists. So, yeah, I know not everybody is ever going to understand that, but I think especially in the infant loss community, it's something that we all get.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I love that you quoted the Francesca Cox. She has um, it's sort of a workbook that's really artsy, and it's kind of like a journal for grieving child loss. And that was actually the first book that I bought after the miscarriage. That I'm very artsy. Like I love watercolor and Bible journaling, and um, I have this friend from church that she's sort of like discipling me and walking with me, and she got me into Bible journaling. So that's a huge thing as far as like what I felt so much healing in like my time with the Lord. Is digging in through that more creative side. So that's so neat that you mentioned her.
Yeah. What's that book called, or the workbook?
Let me see.
And then I could put a link to it. So if anyone's interested, they can
Yes.
hop over on Amazon or wherever it's
Oh,
sold.
it's so good. It's called Facets of Grief, and it's a workbook that you can sort of work through your grieving process. It'll have fun projects that has like throw a plate,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
really, really fun things, or like scribble something, or write in really big paint. So I mean, it's got journaling sections, but it also has little prompts and then something to like keep in mind throughout that week. It's really neat.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome, especially like you said, if you're a creative type, which I don't know if I would consider myself that, but like I can imagine how like getting your paints out and all that would just like really help your grieving process. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
especially when you don't have the words. It's just kind of assign a color to your grief. I'm like, okay, purplish blue. Like, no. So it's fun, but as fun as a grieving workbook could be.
Yeah, yeah, but a really great tool, like a great,
For
like
sure.
a tool for catharsis, I guess is what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Caitlin. Well, I'm going to wrap up here with just a couple of questions that I ask every guest that comes on. As you are walking out the story that God has written for you, what is a heart lesson that He's been reminding you of lately?
Oh, that he wants to take my mourning and turn it into dancing, that he wants to restore my joy, and that he can restore your joy in the middle of your pain, in the middle of your heartache. So even when I feel like it's completely impossible um, that God's going to keep his promises and that he's never going to leave me. So yeah,
Yeah,
that about sums it up.
that's so good. It reminds me of, I don't know if you read I Will Carry You by Angie Smith, but that was the first book I read after our daughter was diagnosed, which it's going on 6 years now, which is kind of
Wow.
bananas. But and Anyway, she uses the story of Lazarus and Jesus like raising Lazarus from the dead. And she talks about like in the moment where he called to Lazarus, Mary and Martha didn't know that he was actually going to come forth, but they had to believe. It's like, do you think that Jesus was capable of doing that? And then she just posed this question, like, in your grief, what do you believe that the Lord is capable of doing? And I think, like you said, he wants to restore our joy. And I think we need to just have faith that he is able to do that. We don't necessarily know what it's going to look like, but he is 100% capable and able to do it. And maybe that's like the first step in that direction is like, God, I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't even feel it, but I believe that you're able. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It's such a great book. Man, I don't even know. I got a chance to meet Angie Smith like probably actually about this time last year. She was at a conference here and like, oh man, I don't even think I said actual words. I think I was just, but it was awesome. You know, when you have a person that's made such an impact on like such a significant, oh man. So anyway. All right, Caitlin, well, this is my very last question just for fun. What's something you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to, it's a little shallow, but I'm looking forward to summer break. Summer break's coming up in about 7 weeks.
Okay.
So I'm ready to get into a rhythm of like healthy rest and kind of reviving myself. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So just 7 weeks. Do you guys get out in June?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Beginning of June.
Yeah, we kind of get out in the middle of June. Like I know some people get out like at the end of May.
Oh, yep.
So that's not us either. But then we don't start school till September, like the day after Labor Day. So there's some people that go back in the middle of August. And
yep, that's us.
Yeah. Oh, is it? And then you still go all the way to May or to the middle of June.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then teachers go back 2 weeks before.
Oh, wow. You guys are just like super educated over there or something.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Oh, that's funny. All right, Caitlin. Well, I am just so thankful that we got to hear your story on the podcast today. Thanks for being willing to share. Can you tell everyone where we can connect with you on the internet?
My website is called duetojoy.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram under Due to Joy as well. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to point people your way. And I know that your story is just going to be such an encouragement to mothers who are walking the same road that you've walked. And also, I think just for women to know how to support their friends who are walking through this road of grief and loss. And so just thank you for your testimony and for giving purpose to your pain.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for talking with me tonight. And I'm so grateful for your friendship and this little community that we have. So thank you so much.
Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing your story and the story of sweet little Avery, and just for using your testimony to encourage women who are walking the road of loss and who are struggling to make sense of their faith and overcome darkness that they feel. And just thank you so much for being an encouragement to all of us who have been there and those who are there right now. Caitlin had some incredible wisdom to share just in general for anyone who is going through a difficult time. And I just asked her what the process was like as the Lord brought her out of that very dark season. And there were 3 things that she said kind of interspersed throughout the conversation. And so I just wanted to point those out right now because I think they are really, really helpful guide. So the first thing that she said, when you're in a season of darkness, the first thing to do is to recognize and combat lies from the enemy. And one that the enemy was trying to push on her was that God had left her and her body had failed her. And she recognized that those were lies because everything is held in the hands of our Father and nothing happens without him being in control. So she knew that those were lies from the enemy. So that was her step 1 to overcoming darkness. Second, she said, was to memorize scripture. And if you go to her blog, duetojoy.com, she has so many posts about different types of scripture to memorize, depending on what type of hardship you're experiencing. So Caitlin has organized so many great collections of verses for anything you might be going through. There's one that she has 20 Bible verses for life's storms, 10 verses to combat fear, 30 verses about joy, and the latest, she has 12 verses for Mother's Day. So if you are looking for scripture to memorize, scripture to help you through whatever darkness you're feeling right now, head over to Caitlin's website, duetojoy.com. And she's already done the work for you. Just look at those verses, write them down, print them off, and I know they'll be great help for you. And the last thing Caitlin said that was just so instrumental to helping her out of this season of darkness was to find people who would pray for you and over you. And she said she had those family members and friends who would pray for her in the middle of the night, who would text her anytime. And that is just huge. That is one of the biggest ways we can battle the enemy is through prayer. And so I would encourage you, if you're going through a dark time, find somebody that you can request prayer from and who you know will pray for you. And we even have a little Heart Lessons community group on Facebook. You can search for it in the groups. And every Thursday is our day to pray for one another. And that's just been a really sweet time. And so I would invite you, if you are going through a hard time, find the group. And we would love to pray for you and lift you up in that way. All right, friends. Well, I know I've mentioned Caitlin's website a few different times in this closing segment. But again, her website is duetojoy.com. And you can find more about her story and all of her resources and where you can connect with her on social media. She's on Instagram as well at Due to Joy. All right, friends. Well, the last and final segment for the Mother's Day series is coming after this one. Part 4 is going to feature everybody's favorite boo mama, Sophie Hudson, and she is going to talk about what it is like to mother a teenager. And I loved having that conversation with her. She's super fun. And if you're not familiar with her, you should definitely Google her and check her out. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. And if you've been listening for a while and haven't yet left a rating or a review, I would love it if you would be willing to do that. It really is just helpful for the algorithms on iTunes for suggesting the podcast to other listeners. And of course, the positive reviews and 5-star ratings are the most helpful. Well, thanks again to Caitlin, and I'm sending a special hug out there to all of you mothers who find Mother's Day a little bit difficult because of whatever circumstance you're facing, and so my heart goes out to you today. I just want to know that you are loved, and this is a safe place for you, and you are not alone. As always, friends, I hope you found this episode to be inspiring and encouraging to help you walk well in the story that God has written especially for you. Bye, guys.